Hi everybody, my name is Jess, and if you haven't been to my channel before, welcome. Generally on this channel I make a lot of videos about Semester at Sea, which is a study abroad program that I went on when I was a sophomore in college and I'm now a senior. And just so basically, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, Semester at Sea is a semester-long voyage on the ocean on a cruise ship, sort of like Sweet Life on Deck, and there's around 500 students from all around the world and all different colleges and universities within the United States, and you travel to 11 or so different countries, get off at each one, and then take your classes while you're on the ship. And while a lot of my videos are always like really happy and telling you the good parts about Semester at Sea because it is really fun and a good experience, there are also, of course, some downsides that I've never really talked about, and a lot of that has to do with the ethics of Semester at Sea. And that is something that I've gotten more and more questions about recently, like sustainability and the economic impacts, and also like the political impacts of going to different countries and being like a tourist, or going to countries that have like political issues going on in them. For example, Israel was just added to the spring 2022 voyage, and Semester at Sea hasn't really like addressed that change or talked about what was going on in the country at the time that they added it to the itinerary. So I will for sure be talking about that a little later in the video. But just generally, I'm gonna be talking about some of the negative impacts of cruise ships and just really like the ethical things to consider when you're going on a voyage of this magnitude or studying abroad in this way. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, I'm not saying you should do it, I'm saying think about these things and then make your own decision based off of this information that other people tell you, things you find on your own, and information from my other videos as well. Like, you in no way need to take my opinions as facts. I'm just a little college girl doing her own research, and I will link all the places where I got my information in the description box. But if I miss any information, or if you have a different opinion, you can leave that in the comments. And I will also preface this by saying that Semester at Sea tries to be different than other cruise ships. For example, we are not allowed to like call it a cruise ship when you're on the actual voyage. You're supposed to call it, like I just said, a voyage, not just like a vacation. And a big message that they send you when you're on the ship is you're supposed to be learning, and you're supposed to be like students and educators and people who are understanding cultures in different ways. You're not tourists. Like, Semester at Sea is first and foremost an educational institution. It is run by the Institute for Shipboard Education, so you're not just like traveling as a vacation, you're traveling to learn things and to become a more global citizen. So that is probably something good to mention up front as well. Like, you're not going into this to travel on a vacation, you're going into it to learn things, meet new friends. Of course you're traveling to different countries, but Semester at Sea's messaging is really that you're supposed to be learning things and it's supposed to be educational. So we better get started, or this is gonna be like an hour long. So here we go into the ethics of Semester at Sea. All right, so within the negative impacts of cruise ships, of ships in general, the things we're going to be talking about are environmental impacts and economic impacts. So we're going to start with the environmental impacts. So just thinking about cruise ships generally, each one is basically like a floating city because they have like rooms inside of them, they have dining halls, they have bathrooms for every room. You know, like when I was on the ship, even though it was like me and my other roommate, we had our own bathroom, we had our own shower like within our room. And then we had like a movie theater on the ship, we had a swimming pool. So it's basically like its own little city, and it creates as much pollution as a little city would as well, because you're living on the ship for 3 to 4 months. Like, you're gonna create garbage and pollution as much as you would at home. However, the environmental impact that you have when you're on a cruise ship, according to the Pacific Standard report in 2016, is 3 times as much as you would have if you were just living on land. The most obvious reason for this is because you're using fuel or oil to travel like so many miles, hundreds of miles every single day. Whereas if you were living at your home college or just like at your house in your home country, you wouldn't be like traveling that much. Maybe you take a car to and from work, to or from school, or a bus, but you wouldn't be on a large cruise ship, a commercial cruise ship that is traveling across the ocean. So according to the Semester at Sea website, the World Odyssey, which is the ship that you're living on, travels 60,000 miles per year. And that is nearly 1/3 of the distance from the Earth to the moon. That is something that they actually say on their website, so it's not like hidden information. It's literally 60,000 miles per year. And therefore, you use 17,000 metric tons of oil to do this sort of transportation, which sounds like a lot. But then again, if you were to travel back and forth from your home country, say the United States, to each country that you visit on the ship, you might actually be using like the same amount of fuel to go back and forth, and it would also rack up a negative environmental impact. So this isn't to say not to go on semester at sea because it uses fuel to travel around the world. It's just something to keep in mind that if you were to stay in your home country, you would not be causing this sort of environmental impact. But unfortunately, that is an unavoidable side effect of travel. Unless you're literally like walking or biking from place to place, you're going to be using up fuel or oil and putting out more greenhouse gases into the environment, which really does suck. But again, it's unavoidable if you're planning on traveling in your life at any time anyways. However, it is true that mile per mile, a cruise ship versus an airplane, a cruise ship causes more of a detrimental environmental impact, but it's not that much. It's like a marginal amount. So if you're going to travel to 11 countries in your lifetime anyways, and you're doing it on the ship, it's not that different of an impact on the environment for fuel. However, there are other things that it does cause an impact on. And unfortunately, traveling in a cruise ship affects our world's oceans more than traveling in an airplane does. And one of the biggest issues with this is that when you're on a ship, like, something that I didn't think about before I was on semester at sea is that something has to happen with all like the water that we use and the sewage that is produced every single day on the ship with like 800 passengers, 500 students, and then like staff and their families. Like, what happens to all that dirty water? It turns out that it's dumped back into the ocean. So I'm gonna tell you what I found out about like sewage treatment on cruise ships now, which is so fun. I love talking about this topic specifically. But all cruise ship sewage goes through what is called sewage treatment, where solid and liquid waste is separated and sterilized. And then the solid waste is said to be incinerated, so burned up, you know, and released into the atmosphere, I guess. And then liquid waste is released back into the ocean. And like I said, apparently it's like clean water when it's released back into the ocean. However, in 2016, Princess Cruises was fined $40 million for polluting the ocean by dumping over 4,000 gallons of oily waste off the coast of Britain. And then just in September of 2019, 2 cruise lines were charged with unauthorized discharge of untreated gray water. So that gray water means like water used for like showering or cooking. So they were just like releasing it wherever, and it wasn't sanitized at all. So this isn't to say that semester at sea isn't like sanitizing properly or like doing any of that, but this is an issue with a lot of cruise lines, so it's something to keep in mind that this could be like a potential pollution source. However, there are some things that I learned about semester at sea while I was on the voyage that I think are pretty interesting, because this is like a little tidbit information thing that I don't really know if I've shared in a video before. But when we were leaving Ecuador on the ship for our next port, which was Costa Rica, there was a field program of about 20 students who had gone to Peru instead of staying in Ecuador, and they paid like $4,000 to do so for like 4 days. But they went there and they were having trouble getting back to the ship on time. So we were waiting for them there overnight and just like waiting for them to get back because we didn't want to leave them in the country. However, the captain literally said like if they're not back by 8 a.m. then we have to leave because all of the water tanks were full. So the interesting thing about semester at sea and other cruise ships is that they bring in water from the ocean to purify for your showers, for your drinking, for all of that, because it's not like they could carry that much fresh water with them on the ship. Like, they have to use seawater purified for all of those basic necessities. But the thing is, all of their water tanks were full because people had been using like the showers and like cooking food and everything while we were in port as well. And there's a rule where you cannot like release the dirty water, or like I guess it's the sanitized water, but the water that's already been used on the ship back into the ocean until you're like 200 nautical miles from the shore. So they want you to do it in the open water. So if those students weren't back on the ship and the ship had stayed in port, they would have had to shut off all the water completely. No one would be able to use like the bathrooms, the showers, or to cook meals in the dining halls or restaurants, because there was no more clean water on the ship, because they had to release the old dirty water, sanitized dirty water, and bring in new fresh water to filter it, and then we could use it for showers and all of that. So it's not like cruise ships are like dumping the sanitized water right into the waterways of like countries and like into their bays and ports and things. It is in the open ocean, so it shouldn't really have any environmental impacts. But then again, like, the information about how that water and like waste is sanitized is a little foggy out there on the internet. But I have faith that Semester at Sea is actually sanitizing correctly and not just like dumping dirty water, dirty sewage into the oceans. Something that I do know is that they use a company called CMI Ship Management to do all of this sanitation and basically to like manage and run the background stuff that's going on the ship. And I searched everywhere to try to find how Semester at Sea gets rid of their waste and just like more information on that. And their website, the CMI Ship Management website, was really vague, but you can look there yourself as well and try to like deep dive to find some more information. And if you do, please leave it in the comments because I am curious about it, but I was just having trouble finding anything. Which in a way worries me that this information is kept hidden, but also like I don't think that anything like shady is going on. And now, since we're already on this topic of sustainability, I can tell you the things that Semester at Sea does advertise that they are doing to make their ship more sustainable. So they have like a little bit of information on their website, but like not all of it, not all that I would want, but I can tell you what they are doing. So starting with the fall 2018 voyage, so 1 year before mine, kind of surprised they didn't do this beforehand, but 1 year before mine, they had new policies and procedures that were implemented to limit plastic and limit waste. So they got rid of plastic straws, which is something I noticed on my voyage. If I got like a smoothie, it would always come with a paper straw, and they use biodegradable plastics now, so they're all compostable, which is really good. And then garbage and laundry liners are swapped to be plant-based and biodegradable. And something else that was on the ship, which was really cool, is they had like a water bottle filler on the top deck, which was added in 2018 to encourage people to use like reusable water bottles, which of course is always a good thing. And then another change that Semester at Sea proudly advertises is that they don't use like single-use ketchup packets or like single-use yogurt containers. Everything's bought in bulk and served in like ceramic bowls or like the squeezy ketchup bottles that multiple people can use, so that's less plastic as well. And then also apparently Semester at Sea has started doing like a recycling kind of thing, which is really good, which I don't know, they didn't tell us about any of this on the ship, so I'm just like finding it out now and sharing it with you guys. But apparently they installed a plastic shredder and a glass compactor. And this one, I don't know if this is like superficial or actually like helpful, but it says that the ship received a makeover with silicone paint that prevents the buildup of barnacles, reduces drag, and saves fuel. So that's also good, and that is actually all that Semester at Sea says about sustainability on their website. So I wish that they would say a little more about what they're doing and be more transparent about like the numbers of everything. But I'm glad that they are doing these things and reducing plastics and trying to recycle. So that sums up this little like environmental section of the video. And I've given you some things to consider, to think about, like the impacts of fuel usage, the impacts of travel on the environment, and how Semester at Sea is dealing with waste and what they're doing about like plastic usage. And now let's move into the economic impacts of Semester at Sea. Okay, so for this section, I'm going to start by sharing some information written about by Ross Klein, who is an author, and he wrote the book Cruise Ship Squeeze, and it's all about the economic impacts of cruise ships. And he basically argues that cruise ships take advantage of local economies. So what he says is that as opposed to working with the communities in places where they port, many cruise ships invest in terminals or in like port locations that only benefit their own economic interests. And according to Klein's book, I'm going to read this directly, it says that cruises threaten to boycott destinations if they attempt to raise their port charges, which can be as little as $1 per person. So a port charge is like how much each person has to pay to get off the ship, and that goes back to like local tourism industries and local businesses and all of that, and like keeping the port safe and clean. So what he's basically saying is that cruise ships are taking advantage of these local economies who are only asking for like $1 for people to visit and like get off the ship, and they could be asking for a lot more, and that could help like local communities. But cruise ships are basically saying like, you can't do that, like we're not going to pay that. So an example of this is that in 2004, the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association's 12 members, so 12 different companies that own cruise ships, threatened to boycott Antigua and Barbuda because the countries raised their port charges to $2.50 per person instead of $1. So they raised them by $1.50, and all these cruise ships boycotted these locations. And the threat actually worked, and these ports backed off. So that just kind of shows like the power of the cruise ship industry on local economies and the places that they're visiting, because I don't know, like these economies have been building up their tourism industry for a long time, and to have all the tourists just stop coming there sort of like cuts their economy in half. Like how are they going to have visitors to actually help them pay all these bills? So they're sort of like stuck in this situation working with like bad cruise ship companies. Not saying that Semester at Sea is a bad cruise ship company, just that cruise ships in general can be a little shady. And you know, like I was saying, in a way Semester at Sea is different than other cruise ships, because we don't just get off and on for one day. Like the larger cruise ships with like 10,000 passengers that we would like dock next to, they would all pour off into one city for a single day for like 8 hours and then get back on the ship and like leave to the next location, which really is just like a flood of people, a flood of business, and then nothing. And for a community to be able to handle that sort of like intense visitation of their community, of their city, they need to be prepared with like a ton of restaurants, a ton of things for people to do, and a lot of like souvenir shops as well, because like that's what a lot of people are looking for. They're not always looking for like the best cultural experience or the most authentic experience. Like they just want a really quick like 8-hour condensed version of a country, which is so, I don't, like, it just rubs me the wrong way. But that's what a lot of these ports have catered to, because that's what sells and that's what makes them money. And that's what the cruise ships are bringing people into for. But with Semester at Sea, you dock for usually like 5 days, and people stay in the port city where the ship is for like 1 or 2 days, and then usually travel further into the country for the rest of it, or for like the middle section of those 5 days. Which I personally think is a better way to do things, because then you're not overrunning the already crowded port cities. You're seeing more of the country, you're getting a more authentic experience. You can interact with like locals and actually see the culture and not just like the portrayed culture of the port city. And then you can bring like your money and your business to smaller businesses outside of the port city, smaller communities, and actually like help different places out with your money and your spending. But the really like unfortunate thing is that it's too late for a lot of the port cities and port communities to recover from this overrun of tourism. Because for example, I remember when we visited Dubrovnik, Croatia on my voyage, which is a beautiful little walled-in city on the coast of Croatia, and it's actually best known for being the place where people filmed in Game of Thrones. So it's super popular because that was a really popular TV series, and a lot of people want to go there because it looks so beautiful on the screen. They love the show and they just want to also visit like a beautiful little walled-in city. However, it was really kind of sad to talk to the person who was bringing us around on a tour for one of my field programs, like for my field class. I was in a class on linguistics, and we were talking about the language in Croatia and their different like letters and pronunciations and all of that, and we were exploring like the walls of the ancient city and just learning about the history of it. And the tour leader basically said that there was nothing left of the original city that she once knew. Like she had lived in Dubrovnik, or like right outside the walls, her entire life and went to school there and everything. And she said that like since that series started, since Game of Thrones started, like everything had changed. Every like local restaurant had become like Americanized, serving only like Americanized food and things people would actually want to eat, like not like the actual local Croatian cuisine. And that even like just like useful shops for people that live there, like a dentist's office for example, turned into like a tourist trap in a way of like selling souvenirs instead of actually giving the people who lived there the useful services that they needed to live. And I went to like a little convenience store to buy soap when I was there because I needed more like laundry detergent to wash my clothes. And the same tour guide told me that if you live in Croatia and you actually live in Dubrovnik, the prices that you pay at that little store are like 5 times less than they charge tourists, because they know that tourists are just there for like one day. They're just there to like pay whatever price they need to and leave. It's not like they're actually taking in their surroundings. They're just like taking photos and seeing like what was made to look perfect by the people that live there. And on the ship in one lecture we actually learned a little bit more about the impact of like TV shows and movies being filmed in specific countries or in specific cities, like New Zealand and like the Lord of the Rings. Like that caused a ton of tourists to come, which is good for a local economy, but it also changes it. It makes it less local and more commercialized, and it can literally like overrun natural environments and really like cause damages to the places that you're visiting. And this just like made me sad to hear in Croatia. Like I feel like I'm on a rant kind of thing now, but then when it was 2020 and there were no more visitors going there, I was like, what happened to Dubrovnik? Like did everything like just shut down? Because they had no tourists. They used to have like 20,000 plus tourists every day coming in off the ships and just traveling through Croatia, like down the countryside to Dubrovnik Dubrovnik because that is such a popular place to visit and to go. So like what happened to all those businesses that relied on only tourists and not the locals? Like that was just like a sad thing to think about. And none of that I just talked about is like Semester at Sea's fault. Semester at Sea, like I said, really wants you to like experience the actual culture and like go away from the port city and see more of the country and learn about like the politics and the people and all of that. But it is part of like the cruise ship industry, and Semester at Sea is, I don't know, it's kind of like lumped in with those cruise ships because you're on a ship. So there's no real solution here. Again, it's just something to think about and consider when you're going on a cruise ship as your form of study abroad. And then just one more thing to mention in this economics section is how expensive Semester at Sea is. I've made a video telling you about like all the little costs on Semester at Sea and adding them all up for you, and the general range of money you're gonna spend for this program is like $32,000 to $50,000 plus. Like if you're not traveling cheaply and trying to like save money, you could spend more than $50,000 on this program easily, which is insane. And when you think about like what else could I do with my money, it's a really weird like mind game to like actually consider that. Like the average study abroad program costs I think like $10,000 for the semester, and Semester at Sea costs 3 times that minimum. So that is just something to consider as well. Like, is the price point worth it? And I actually plan on making a video about that, about the worth of Semester at Sea, or the relative worth of it, to help you know more about like the monetary impact of what you're doing and what you're spending compared to like other things you could do with your money as well, or like traveling on your own or any of that. So look out for that video in the future. Okay, so that basically covers my 2 little sections on the environmental impacts of Semester at Sea and the economic impacts of Semester at Sea, or not even Semester at Sea, but just the cruise ship industry in general. And now I'm gonna bring up some questions that I've received about the locations that Semester at Sea chooses and the ethical impacts of those, and just the politics in the world at the moment. So like I mentioned before, Israel was just added as a voyage stop on the spring 2022 voyage, and Israel has been in the news a lot in the past couple of months. Israel and Palestine, and some people have reached out to me with concerns about like not being comfortable traveling to Israel and not knowing why Semester at Sea like didn't talk about like that addition or anything like that. And I am actually going to start by talking about a different stop that Semester at Sea made back in 2018 to Myanmar, which also caused some conflict among like the voyagers and like their families and the shipboard education team. And the concerns here were that there were atrocities committed against the Rohingya Muslim communities, and that the voyagers didn't know like Semester at Sea's stance on the issue while they were still going to travel to this country. And I am also going to basically read this from the Semester at Sea website. The article's name is Semester at Sea's Continued Travel to Myanmar, if you want to go read it yourself. But they basically said that it was an important learning opportunity for Semester at Sea voyagers to go here. And this was not in support of, but rather in opposition to the atrocities that have occurred in the state. I'm gonna read this part verbatim. Our mission is to study history, root causes of conflict, and the importance of citizenship, education, and public participation in political processes. The shipboard community will engage in thoughtful, comprehensive discussions about the crisis. It will come to understand the root causes of such terrible outcomes. In addition, it is our hope that Semester at Sea voyagers will become educated global citizens who can recognize such root causes, analyze the complexities of humanitarian crises wherever they may be, and be part of the solution. So that was their general response to the concerns about traveling to this country. And in a way, I feel like they would have a very similar response to questions about traveling to Israel. Semester at Sea does not want to come across as a political association with any opinions, so I doubt that they'll make like a real statement about like what's going on. They will probably again say that it's a learning opportunity. But if traveling there is something that is against your morals, then that is of course your own choice. And you of course do not have to go on that specific voyage or support Semester at Sea's travel to that location. I will say that when you're on the ship, you do talk a lot about like past wars and genocides and anything negative that has happened in the countries that you're going to have a better understanding of their culture and what has like brought them to this point in history. However, it is a tricky situation when this point in history is in the middle of a war or something like that. I will also say on this topic that Semester at Sea has traveled to Israel in the past, and they actually had to stay there for I think a month or more when their ship needed repairs at one point during one voyage. So they probably do have like close connections to a lot of people there, a lot of like tourism industries, and might feel like they need to support those places because, as I mentioned in the economics section, a lot of communities have ended up relying on cruise ships for support and for income to their local communities. And just with like 2020 and the COVID virus, a lot of places have definitely been struggling without people visiting them. And that is not to like justify visiting a country that you don't want to, or where something political is going on that you don't agree with. It's just to say that Semester at Sea might still feel obligated to visit the places they have in the past to support them during this difficult economic time. So to sum up this section, if you have concerns about Semester at Sea going to a specific location, I would say your first step would be to email them and express those concerns, ask for a statement to be made, and you can DM them on Instagram or leave comments under any post, because they're honestly probably more likely to respond to something on Instagram because it's a DM that's just like sitting in their inbox. So I would try that if you were concerned about something as well. But wow, that was a lot of information about just like ethical concerns with Semester at Sea. I hope that maybe you learned something, or like you're thinking about something in a different way. But again, this is not to say like don't go on Semester at Sea, or like you have to go on Semester at Sea regardless of all these issues. It is just giving you some things to think about so you can actually form your own opinion about how you want to spend your time, your money, and your college experience traveling with study abroad. And if Semester at Sea is the right thing for you, then that is great. It was the right thing for me in fall of 2019, and I was very grateful for the opportunity. However, there was no video like this that existed when I was deciding to go on my voyage, and I really wish there was. So I'm glad that I could actually make this for you guys with the knowledge that I've gained from my experience on Semester at Sea and the research that I've done since then. So like I said, please leave any comments or more things you have to say below this video, and use it as a place to post more research, more opinions, and just to talk with other people about the ethics of all of this. And of course, subscribe to my channel if you want to support me and want me to keep making videos like this. So thank you guys for watching this video, and I will see you next time.